Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I have kind of two things to show you today. One of them is a free audio unit and VST plugin called FathomFive, but the other is how I'm going to use FathomFive, because I've been trying to work out solutions to some problems with digital audio workstations, and me being Chris from Airwindows, I'm pretty comfortable with trying to invent a new way of digital audio workstation recording. Maybe not really entirely new, but it is my way. So I'm going to show you a routing system for using FathomFive to emulate the result of analog recording with tape machines. And from that, I mostly mean not the negative results, like blur and having to adjust azimuth and all that kind of stuff. I'm old enough to go back to those days, and I've had to adjust azimuth before, and you don't really want to have to adjust azimuth ever. No, what I mean is the fullness and richness and roundness of those days, especially in the bass. Now, you could run stuff through, tape machine emulations. I've made those. I still have those. Those will be released in future if the Patreon thing that I'm doing works out. But what I'm doing now is going to be available now, and it is, of course, free. Here is a little digital mix. Now, it's just a little power trio kind of thing. The idea is to show how I can fill that out to have it be a lot bigger, because as you can hear, this is not the biggest mix. I'm going to fiddle with this a little bit, but the idea is this is a well-recorded but very plain digital mix. It's just sitting there. As you can see, I've got a peak limiter going on. The peak limiter is set very normally. It's not got any kind of gain boost involved. It's just for catching stuff. And this is using nothing fancy from Airwindows at all. Now, here's how you add console to this system. I'll go to Airwindows. This is the whole list. As you can see, it's rather large. I've added console bus, default setting. The way this works, currently the VST ports aren't necessarily saving their settings very well, but my workaround is here. Everything that I'm doing is not going to require any saving of settings. We're using entirely default settings for everything. And they default to no attenuation here. And so my basic tracks, I've got clip gain controlling the volumes of those. I should also mention what you see here, these audio units, they do restore their settings just fine. It's only the VSTs that I'm working on. And here's what it sounds like with console. Already kind of bigger, but I have a lot more in mind. Here's what we're going to do. I am adding FathomFive. FathomFive will default to this setting. It's got other stuff that it can do, like sub-octave. You can change the frequency control. You can do a lot of things like that, but I'm adding it to AUX 1. And now what I'm going to do is define Ascent. Everything gets an AUX 1 send. So what we can do with this is as follows. All of a sudden, a lot more lows on this kick. That was not there before. I can take it back away again. And here is what we're hearing when I do that. I put that in. FathomFive is a plugin that can give you a number of effects. One of them is this. You do have a dry wet control, and this is the raw kick drum sound. There's actually a cute trick to this that I'll tell you because I can't show you. I got this from watching an old the Eagles, how they got to be a enormous band video. The history of, I think it was History of the Eagles, part 1 and 2. And when Don Henley is miking up his drums, and they were very particular about miking their things up, he did an interesting thing that I've started to do. If you'd have the entire drum like this, what he did was put the microphone in on the side, right up by the wall of the drum kit. And when you do that, what you've got is a microphone sound that's getting some reinforcement from that nearby wall of the drum. So it's like it's emphasizing the lows. And it's also not pointing at the beater impact point, it's pointing to the side. So the upshot is it's maximizing the lows that you get out of the raw mic. This is essentially similar to an SM7. It's a transformerless 57. I know 57 is not a normal drum mic. You can hear we're not getting an exaggerated low, but exaggerated low, anyone? FathomFive is for that. So what we're doing is we're using it as default setting. I'll show you the frequency as well. Frequency lets you do things like this. Note that I'm driving it pretty hard. I can drive it even harder. FathomFive is not just an EQ. You can kind of overdrive it and it'll work with that type of sound. I can make it go brighter. Or I can go right down to the lowest, deepest sounds. But what we're going to do is assume that this is being used on the PC on my current version. Oh, and also root note, that's the same thing as changing the amount that I'm driving it on the bus. This is why I can use it in a setting where I'm still debugging the control saving on PC VSTs. I can also show you something else. We've got there's my bass guitar. I know it doesn't sound very much like a guitar, but here we have it doing lows, but I've got this insane sub-octave effect. This is basically more a thunder generator than anything else. You can hear it's not very clear. I have recenter versions of this algorithm, the for-pay ones like dubsub, that do a much cleaner job of handling sub-octave. However, I could also give you a different example here. Or rather, I could give you earlier on in the track where it's not so more of a normal sound. And we have this very dirty sub sound going on. And yeah, you can use both. And again, FathomFive is a first try of this type of algorithm, so the first time I did it, that's why I'm defaulting it to full-on root note. The frequency is 0.5, which is a good average setting for it, and dry wet to 1. What that means is that if you're using a VST, as in a VST right now, a VST where I'm still debugging it and getting it to save its silly settings, this will work. You don't have to do anything extra to it. You just treat it like it was a control-less plugin, and it just comes out like this, and then it will go back to that when you open the plugin again. I should point out that if you really wanted to change it before I fix the bugs in it, and I'm working on this real hard, what you do is put a dot of automation in there somewhere. just set it to automate, and that'll make it go back to whatever the settings are. But we're not talking about that right now. What we're talking about is getting a sound out of this. Since I've already shown you how to set up a console mix, I'll show you how to set up a console plus FathomFive mix for a sort of big, deep, full kind of sound. And that's done as simply as this. Here's the console. It's hitting the peak limiter. And then if you know digital audio workstations, you know you can select a bunch of things and then alter them. I can even bring this to full volume here. And then we can get lots of bass reinforcement out of it. Or indeed, we can exaggerate it until it sounds like we're just overdriving somebody's tape machine somewhere. But that's not necessarily what we want, as fun as it is. You can see that we're hitting the peaks pretty hard with this, like 10 dB peak limiting. Now this isn't necessarily what we want, so if we pull it way back, we're going back to the original sound, and we're losing that thick, heavy bass quality. So what we're going to do is find an intermediate factor. I'm going to bring it until I'm getting a hint of those lows on all of the sounds. Then if there's anything that I actually want to take out, I'll take it out. But more relevantly, if there's something like this kick drum, where I'd like to give it a lot more of that reinforcement, I'll do that. And in that way, we're using a bus to feed a tone generating kind of thing, the FathomFive, which is giving us the low end. And it's being fed into the system after the sounds have been hit with console channel, but before they go through console bus. It's an additional thing being added. And we can do a number of things like that also. For instance, if I wanted to add a echo, for instance, and I made another bus for that, and I added, say, echo. We have a very overdriven. And what we have on that bus is this. Lows there. And I'm going to switch off all of the different. I'm going to switch off all those different sounds there. Now, an interesting thing I should point out here in a console mix is I'm running this stuff in through this other bus. It's going into the echo. This is an ordinary logic echo, but it is inside console. It's between these sections of this console channel and between a console bus. So what it's doing is every little echo is acting like we're adding another aux, another copy of the original channel. And console bus is designed to work with that kind of thing. Expand it outwards, make it sound good, make it sound more full. Now, one thing that's not doing is driving into aux 1, the FathomFive bus, but I can make it do that. All I have to do is tell it this, and I'll show you what you get. I can feed it in this way. And I think that's actually a better way of getting a warm sound out of this than using the color control there. I'll dial it back. One of the reasons I hate using plugins for some of these things is you always want to make the numbers add up to something, and of course the numbers don't matter at all. Let's unsolo this. Throw it on something interesting like maybe a quarter note triplet. Yeah, that's cool. We'll keep that. But notice how the echo of that is now got a fullness to it. I could mute this, and then you'll hear what it's like without FathomFive. But if I put FathomFive on, you hear what the echo sounds like driving FathomFive really hard. It's got a little bit more size to it, and again, that's what we're going after. So now pretty much what's left to do is just adjust these various settings, and I'm going to do that as quickly as I can, having already established all of these AUXs, all of these console channels, by just selecting a bunch of things and then knowing what I'm going after. I went in and I added the echo to the FathomFive channel. But at this point, it's more a matter of just fiddling with the individual settings. Let's go after the kick drum. No echo on the kick drum, I think. Let's have some less amplitude on. Actually, we don't have to do it that way. Let's do another overall. How about a little bit more on the overheads? We'll kill that on the room, we'll kill it on the snare. The snare doesn't feel very full. Let's give it some more room. And our room, this is actually acoustic distance. This is a microphone. I can point it. It's right over there elsewhere in my place. And I had my little drum room. I left the door open. So while I was recording this, the neighbors were very pleased with me, I'm sure. But I was able to get a acoustic room sound. So that's what we get out of that. I can actually get an echo off of that too. But that sounds a little too crazy, so let me take it back off again. And then lastly, let's clean up some of the chaos by taking out the low frequency fill on, say, just the sim. And let's give a little more to the bass and the guitar. And then make sure those guys get that echo, but take the bass out of the echo because it's just going to muddy it up. I could take the overheads out of the echo too. Let's hear what that sounds like. Interestingly, I still hear bass on AUX 2, which is unexpected. Check that again. Yeah, very interesting. So, bus 2 is definitely being fed by things. maybe what I'm hearing is some kind of AUX related something. DAWs are strange this way. Sometimes they'll just throw tricks at you. I can clearly hear that this is what the bass sounds like. And then if I put this AUX on solo, I'm hearing that, but for some reason I'm also hearing the bass. Now if I was to turn the AUX up, what I'd be hearing is AUX directly on the echo, and that sounds like this. So I have a funny sort of result here where it wants to listen to all the AUXs at once, or at least it wants to listen to AUX 1 while also listening to AUX 2. But the thing is, in the final mix I want to listen to all these things anyhow, so pretty much what I'm going to do is just go forward with it and see what I can get. And to finish it up, a little quick check on time, about 20 minutes. It's short for me, right? That's being punctual. What I'm going to do is try to tighten up things a little bit. Maybe put a little more of that echo onto the overheads, but I'm going to listen to everything together, listen to everything in the fray, and I'm also going to be pulling down the faders on these, because the way FathomFive is set up, this is a pretty powerful fill. I don't necessarily need as much of that in there. So let's get everything going together, and maybe not as much of that. And AUX 1 down a little bit. Plainly hear the echoes of that guitar in there. We can pull back the snare a little bit because I heard it getting crunched up in there. In fact, I'm going to go over to the clip gain, pull that down just a hair. That's a much drier bass, less of the deepness in there. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull this guitar way back. I'm going to pull the boom back. And I'm going to fill it in more with the lows. There, now we're getting a little more of that low frequency going on in there. And lastly, if you're curious, here's what it would sound like to have the deep bass rolls of the kick and the bass reversed. It sort of swings a little bit more. And of course, we're also smashing the peak limiter here. Periodically, just getting nailed. Enough of that. Let's take this back down a little bit and put this back up. In fact, let's slam the bass. Now with this, what we're doing is we're overdriving the FathomFive AUX really hard and then just backing it off in the mixer. And what that does is it makes it come into console bus quieter, so it's not going to dominate as much. At equal volume, it'll come through as strong as any individual channel, or more, if you're driving it from multiple channels, and as such, it can become a little overwhelming. But if we pull that back, what we end up getting is the ability to have it be much drier like this. I can option click these guys, put them both to 0. And we got a neat little mix. Now if I solo it, it'll sound like this. This is essentially a really overloaded FathomFive bus. I'm pushing it so hard that it's starting to kind of grind, but then if you bleed just a little bit of that in, you get size, but then the impact of things like the kick drum mic, which all by itself is more like this. It's a nice clean sound, and then when you add the lows, there's no problem with defining where the kick is. And then we have just that little bit of oomph added to it. So in less than half an hour, a kind of sort of mix. Using all of these different channels and using all these different plugins, showing you how to instantiate stuff by having multiple things selected. It certainly works in Logic. I'm not sure it works absolutely everywhere. A little bit of copying things back and forth, a little bit of making new sends, and digital mixing shouldn't be a thing of laboring over it with all this fiddly little detail everywhere and millions of little EQs and fine doing stuff and then running things through emulations of everything. It should be possible to just get some basic building blocks like these and hook them together. When you know what you're doing, you can get results real quick, and then you're just working on things like, this is my subs or bass aux, and what we're doing is deciding how hard we drive this thing, the thing that can be kind of overdriven or and again, for now, it defaults to this setting, which is a functional way to get going on it for people who are on the VST world and for whom I haven't fixed all of their control updating yet. I'm hoping it's not going to be too many weeks before I have that completely nailed, because I'm not going to start doing the serious for-pay commercial plugins without having that fixed. But for now, I'm coming up with ways where you can have some of these, like this has a control too, it defaults to that. You can have some of these and start using them whether or not we have the control saving right, and it will continue to honor whatever it is that you're using it with. Once they have it fixed, you'll just be replacing it by swapping in a new version of the plugin, which will then save its settings. But for now, this actually works, and hopefully people will enjoy this strange, perhaps weird way of manipulating things, because, I mean, granted, you can do this and it's its own thing. By the same token, I do have other plugins. So we could just shut this off. And then audio unit people could be using something like, for instance, to tape. And that essentially does similar things to this. To tape makes it go like that. It smooths it in another kind of way. You got your head bump. Head bump is doing very similar things. You got flutter. Here's your head. It's a very big head bump in this guy. There's a lot of things that to tape can do also, but FathomFive is free. And I'm advocating people start learning to use simple, easy to work with sort of building block plugins that don't try to do all those things at once. Like ToTape is one of my better sellers. It sold tens of thousands of dollars of copies. And that's because it's a plugin where you can say, oh, here is ToTape, and it does all these things that sound like a tape deck. It does very well at comparing to real live tape decks when you compare them, but you don't have to have all of this. You can turn it off and put together your mix without even concerning yourself with that sort of high frequency treble rolling quality, without even concerning yourself with things like flutter or whatever. Just focusing on, like, I want the low frequency warmth that they used to get out of 70s mixes. We'll try FathomFive on an aux, and the interesting thing about it is I've got yet another plugin. As you can see, I've made many plugins. They will all become free eventually, if all goes well. I've got 2Vinyl. So we can turn that off, turn tape 4 back on. And here we have one of your modern sort of all kinds of stuff happening in the mix. It's very busy, it's very complicated, and it's got an elliptical EQ, meaning that we can if you're using this into vinyl, that's making the sides not have so much deep bass, which helps in things like club mixes. It has always helped in terms of making real physical vinyl records. But if you were just going to use the FathomFive, and yeah, this sounds cool. Here, check it out, GrooveWorks. It should be fun to get that going into the world. That might be some months ahead. If everything goes well on the Patreon, we will be getting around to a free version of all of these, including 2Vinyl 3. But take all those things out. Put FathomFive back in. Guess what? This setup with FathomFive on an aux, coming in as a mono bus that's centered, is doing the same thing that 2Vinyl was doing. It's acting like an elliptical EQ because although some of these things, like the guitar, might have subsonic frequencies, when you feed them into the mono track, it's going into the center. Anything slightly off-center in the overheads, for instance, that's going into the center as well. So using FathomFive as an aux and ignoring all that other stuff, all that other, let's pretend that we're a tape machine, let's pretend that we're, a mastering lathe, and what else? Let's pretend that we're a vinyl record playing back through a turntable and a stylus, because that's what the Grooveware thing was doing. If you leave all that stuff out, you can still have some of the things like the centered bass that has real practical usefulness. Anyway, FathomFive is the one that I am releasing now. Back in the day, I used to say it's $50. It's not. It's free. It is an audio unit, and it is Mac and PC VST, and it's designed to instantiate just like that. So if you're on Reaper, or if you're on a Mac using Logic, or if you're using the audio unit or anything where it remembers all of its settings fine, you can fool with it to your heart's content. If you were on, for instance, Sonar or Studio One, I think it is, some platform that's not handling the way that I'm doing the controls right now and is not remembering them properly, that's a usable setting. You can use that just like it is, so you can treat FathomFive as if it is a controlless plugin until I solve those bugs. And I'm going to solve those bugs. It's just that I don't make promises and say, oh, it's going to be 2 weeks. It might be 2 weeks, but I'm not making those promises because doing the Patreon thing, I don't have to. I'd rather be honest. I hope you enjoy FathomFive. Those of you that can fiddle with the controls, I'm sure you're going to have great fun, but here is a way of using it that you don't even have to do that. And it's a new way of getting a mix with low frequencies and a whole vibe. With some of that feel of the overprocessed, everything imaginary kind of stuff. Now let me check on my time again. Oh God, I've been going for 40 minutes. So, point made, I think. Also bear in mind that all of this will work just as well on an electronic mix. In fact, this is ideal for electronic mixes going through console because you're probably going to want to have things like kick drums and stuff going on. You might have something where, okay, none of these, none of that, no guitar. You might have something weird like this going on, actually. And you would want to fill in the bass because without it, this is very, very lame. But then if you put the bass in, all of a sudden you have a little bit more roundness going on. And you can do stuff with mixes like this. There's a usefulness to it. A little bit of minimal techno there. Well, maybe not. Anyway, I have been Chris from Airwindows, and I hope you enjoy FathomFive.